So here's the first one. This is a vulnerability scanner for mainly web apps. And Nuclei is very famous, very common. People integrate it with other tools and stuff. And I was really pleased. I had trouble making good projects for Nuclei, but they've made a sort of practice environment to work on, which is very nice. So you work on Debian Linux. You can run on other operating systems too, I think, but I figured out how to run it in Debian. You have to put in Go. Go is Google's special language. And so first you have to install Go, which you can do on either kind of Linux. Then you have to fix the path so it can find your Go, which you can do. And then once you have Go, you can install Nuclei, which you pull from the Nuclei project here. And again, you have to fix the path. And then you can run Nuclei. This is the Nuclei vuln scanner. And what it does is it's not really a generic vuln scanner like Nessus that has thousands of definitions and scans for everything. What you do is you write a definition file telling it what to scan for. So it's sort of like Velociraptor. It doesn't try to recognize everything. It scans for certain things you choose. And so the demonstrations here you're able to get with the default ones. So, and all the targets run in Docker. And if you haven't used Docker, it's very good to practice. You have to install Docker. Docker only runs on 64-bit Linux. It supposedly runs on Windows, although I haven't tried it there. And the point of Docker is you can now run containers which work like virtual machines, but they are much smaller and much faster because they don't make any extra copies of files. They use a file on the host machine if it's the same. So they only store files that have changed from the host. So if you were to run a Linux container on Windows, it would basically be the same as a virtual machine because there'd be no files in common. But if you run a Linux container on a Linux host, it's very small and very fast because most of the files it needs are already existing on the host. So now you install this thing called Nuclei Templates Labs, which are sort of demonstrations to show how it works, which is what we're going to do. To download this thing, and now you have a whole series of labs available in various types. So the first one, I go in here, and this is on authentication bypass in an FTP server from the year 2025, pretty recent. So you go in here, each container has a README file. You go in the folder, and the folder has a README file which explains what it is and how to run it. But for most of them, you just run this, docker compose up -d. That just launches the default container in this directory. And that's usually enough. So when you do that, it will then pull all the data it needs from the server and start it, and it will start listening as Crush FTP is running. And so when I do this, this will show you the listening TCP ports on the machine. It's supposedly running. You can see that it's listening on 8081. So you can go to this login page on 8081 and you'll find the Crush FTP login. And we're not going to bother logging in and attacking it, although you could in like a pen testing class. There's just a way to verify that it's actually running. Now we're going to scan it with an automated scanner to find the vulnerabilities. And for that, you typically just do Nuclei and you give it a URL to it. And then you can add some extra parameters. And what this does, it tells it to ignore info and low findings. Otherwise, it'll have a lot of extra findings that aren't interesting. Only show me the more important findings. And it runs, and see it finds info, and here it finds a warning, and here it finds ones that have a CVE. So it didn't completely ignore them all. I think that's what this means. But anyway, somehow some of them get through. But anyway, the point is the green ones are ones that hit known CVE numbers. More serious, this is a critical one. And it found it. So you can look on the CVE to find out what it is. And, there's a flag to turn in, but that's the point. It finds certain vulnerabilities quite fast. And there's a bunch of other ones. Now you can deleting a Docker container. You do Docker PS to see the running processes, to get its ID number, and then you can stop it and remove it. So that's how you can clean up after yourself. And have a whole bunch of these ready to go, and they all seem to work fine. Here's something called Roundcube that you can run. And again, I don't know what it's supposed to do, but it has a login page. It's some other kind of service that has a vulnerability. And when you scan it, it again has another critical vulnerability that it'll find. And that's from 2020. And then here's one that runs old versions of TLS. This is a fairly common problem on older servers. Because of Edward Snowden, everybody freaked out and they wanted to quit using TLS 1.0 and 1.1 because what he revealed was that the NSA was treating American companies as hostile and hacking them and stealing their data. And the problem with TLS 1.0 and 1.1 is they do not have forward secrecy. So every session is encrypted with the same key. So if they were able later to hack into the server and steal the key, they could decrypt all their saved data from before. And the US and the NSA is doing this at a giant server farm in Utah. They're archiving all the data on the internet, basically forever, to do this process, to go back and decrypt it once they find the key. But TLS 1.2 and later have a different session key for every session. So if they steal a key, they're only going to get that session. And next time you log in, they won't get in. So everybody jumped to upgrade to 1.2 and 1.3 when Snowden's revelations came out. And they realized that this attack, which sounded kind of theoretical and expensive, was in fact really going on. So 1.1 is not considered safe anymore, and so that's what happens here. This, again, you can run one of these. It'll run something on 1.1 and have an error. It'll detect that with the scanner. That's not as critical as the others. That's considered as not as secure as it should be, although in practice, for most people, it probably doesn't matter. And then here's one that had a default login for Postgres. Postgres is a database like MySQL. Another one is one of the more common ones people use. And there was a Postgres version that has a default login vulnerability, default name and password. So this will detect it. I guess that's the password, Iceman or something. Anyway, so that's a useful thing to do to get used to running nuclei. People are integrating it with all kinds of tools, and it's good to see how it works. And I really appreciate them giving us some good test cases to play with, because setting these up is not a small job, and they made it easy. So there's that one.